Hello, everybody, and welcome into today's episode of the Top Cut Yu-Gi-Oh! Podcast. My name is Sunny, and I am here without Caleb. He has some personal stuff that he is attending to, so in the meantime, I have myself and my guest, the RJB0. What's up, dude?
Yeah, you've done the standard thing that creators across the platform do, which is when they can't get their A-list guests, their normal co-hosts, they just bring me on and hope that fills in the gaps, which I think is a smart strategy.
Well, it's worked out well for everybody so far, so I figured I'd give it a shot.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So we've had like minimal interaction before, so I mean, it's something, right?
Yeah, we played junior format together.
Exactly. And like once you've been juniors with somebody before, like, you're friends forever. So
Exactly. True.
So
once you go through that harrowing experience
right.
together,
Once you've
yeah,
lived
it's an
through that
unbreakable
together,
bond.
especially the chaos format, like once you've lived through that
Oh
together,
my.
yeah, I mean you're basically just like at the hip forever. I want to take a quick moment, of course, to thank our patrons. So thank you so much to Austin Johnson, Kane Martin, Master of Isa, Mr. Herbies, Scuzz Daddy, Witchcrafter Main 2022, AD, Aaron Gardner, Anthony Leela, Damian Zink, Dank Nugs, Dino DNA, Mountain Man, Myth Oceanus, Owen Alvarado, Pig, Jeremy Drysdale, Ray Powell, and Sunny Sweet. Thank you all so much for your continued support of the podcast. And if you are new here, you can find us on Twitter at Top Cut Podcast. You can find a link to our Discord, our Patreon, and everything else related in our link tree down below. We do now have a TCG Player affiliate link, and you can find that in the description down below. Whew. You see, I do so many of these intros that sometimes I get all mixed up. I don't even know what I want to do.
You would not believe the number of times I have to re-record my average CMO deck profile.
To be fair, there's a lot of unorthodox things in those deck profiles.
You're not wrong.
And if you're listening on Apple, please be sure to leave a rating and a review. We do read our new reviews out live on the podcast. So make sure it's good. And if you're on Spotify, be sure to smash that follow button. It helps us immensely. And for those that want to watch on YouTube, we are hopefully pretty soon going to be caught up with our YouTube uploads. And then from then on, we have decided that it will no longer be an archive. It will now be a regularly updating thing, just like the rest of our stuff. So it'll update at the same time as everything else. That way it's actually like a useful way to listen to the podcast rather than just, an outdated archive. So we have people asking for that. So we're taking the dive into the YouTube. Oh boy. It's a harrowing experience.
Definitely, it's a big risk.
Yeah, it really is. But it's one that the people are asking for, so the people are going to get it. So for those that don't know a little bit about the RJB0, or RJ, as I will call you for the rest of the time, RJ is the co-host of CMO's show Sealed Showdown, which uploads every Wednesday at 12 o'clock Central Time. I think I have that right.
Yep, yeah. Or Tuesday if you are a rare patron.
That's right. So go subscribe to CMO's Patron too. Do subscribe to all of our patrons. I mean, I'm not going to stop you. And also a co-host of Junior Journey with MBT. Now, Junior Journey is a bit different. You upload every other week. Is that correct?
That is normally correct. We took a major hiatus for mysterious and probably not legal reasons during the month of December, but we are back onto our every other week schedule.
Listen, we all know what it was. We all know that you took the time to really make sure that you got all your bands correct for the Chaos format, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely needed all that time to say we weren't keeping painful choice in the format.
I mean, listen, it's not like you did anything crazy. Like, like leaving Chaos Sorcerer at multiples in the format, or leaving Return from the Different Dimension at 3, or leaving Dimension Fusion at 3. It's not like you did missed anything like that. So, I mean.
Hey, I didn't miss it. That was a fully intentional way of making the format unplayable. I'm very excited about what happens with this version of the format. The folks in the Discord are already going wild with absurdity and jank I have never seen the likes of before.
Yeah, so at the time of this release, that episode will have only been live for a day. And it was funny because, as you mentioned in the episode of Junior Journey, so MBT has a channel called Junior Journey in his Discord server. And if you go into his Junior Journey Discord server, it was like radio silence for like a week because, well, there's no new episode, there's no new ban list, and everybody's just playing chaos decks. And it's like, well, this is like, not really what we signed up for. And like within 10 minutes of the episode posting, I mean, that channel is just going ham. So
yeah, it was really funny. December was abuzz with people coming up with the most broken way to resolve painful choice, and by the first week of January, everybody had determined the most broken way to resolve painful choice, and so just didn't bother. But I think we've gotten more responses on the server in the last 3 hours than the server has ever had before for that channel. So it's very exciting. I always love the time right after the new ban list.
Yes, and if you are interested in playing Junior Journey format, I have actually been playing the format almost as much as Modern. So if you are interested in that and you want to play, I have created a Junior Journey channel in our own Discord server, and you can check it out at any time. It's been there for a while. It's just had no activity. Excellent. Because, well, it's been chaos format, so,
It has indeed.
So, for those interested, you can find that there. And those two shows are not all you do. You also stream a couple times a week, usually, right?
That's true. Yeah, so the major thing that I do is Time Wizard Primers. It is a format of content in which I present people with all the information they need to get started with a retro format. Since Konami has announced that they are sanctioning OTS level retro format play, I want to bring out some of the hidden gems of Yu-Gi-Oh's history, some of the formats that are frequently overlooked. And so what I do is I introduce folks to a format, give them the resources they need, and we spend an entire month on stream breaking it. So I do that on stream. Right now we are working on Abyss Rising format, which has been an absolute blast. It's a fantastic format. I also do Sealed Showdown practice, so if you want to play with some of the worst decks you've ever put together, that's a great place to do it. We are currently in the GX era, and anybody who is familiar with that era of packs knows that absolutely nothing good came out for a good 2 years during that time. And then I play junior format, and that's most of what I do.
Yeah, if anybody here is a patron and they listen to our set breakdowns, we're currently in the GX format, and they suck.
It's a dismal time in Yu-Gi-Oh! That's for sure.
Yeah, so basically all the even the competitive decks and the constructed decks of that time are just how do I say this? They're just GOAT decks with different cards.
Yeah, they're just goat decks with Groucho Marx glasses on. Or maybe they changed their tie.
Yeah, you don't get a real constructed GX deck that's actually its own thing until Perfect Circle, and then Teledad, and not even Teledad, just Dad Return, and that's not even GX format. That's Dad comes out in the last set of GX. So really, I mean, you're basically it's basically not even GX. So yeah, GX sucked.
Yeah.
The most interesting thing was Pot of Avarice.
For sure. Yeah, one of my most controversial takes ever. And this is one I've discussed with folks a lot. Speaking as a competitive player, archetypes were the best thing to ever happen to Yu-Gi-Oh! It's something that a lot of people complain about because we get this kind of attitude in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! That, archetypes make decks cookie cutter. That you play, the same 30 cards and then an assortment of your personal flavor of hand traps and staples and things like that. And that's been a complaint that's existed probably since about 2011. But people don't really realize that before 2010, everybody played the same 20 cards in their deck, no matter what deck they were playing. A Dark World deck was like, it was Goat Control plus like 2 copies of Gold and like a Silva. And so archetypes really did a lot to like silo the power within a format into particular strategies that necessarily have synergy with each other. And therefore, you actually get some deck building variety in Yu-Gi-Oh! Whereas we probably would just be playing something that looks like Dragon Ruler good stuff for the rest of time if Yu-Gi-Oh! were not archetypically based. So, and I think GX is really the poster child for this problem, that just everybody was playing the exact same 2 decks for the better part of like 2 years.
Yeah, it's not anything really interesting. I don't know. As far as like a competitive standpoint, I think GX is like my least favorite era. I mean, I think
It is fair.
Yeah, I think if you go back and look at it, it's just like, I don't know. If you look at the DM era, at least you get, sure, there's jank and BS, but at least once you get to like the GOAT era, you have GOAT format. It's like the bright point of the entire DM era. Well, I say that the first like 2 sets of GX were in GOAT format, but
yeah, yeah.
I will say I don't even count it.
Yeah, and competitive GX is really has really benefited a lot from hindsight. If you look at like the Reaper format community, there is a lot of innovation there. Like there have been a top deck that like never saw the light of day before like this last 6 months is Wind Beatdown. There's a Wind Beatdown deck that uses like Slate Warrior and Sylphid, I want to say. And it's a really, really cool deck that nobody would have thought of back in actual 2005 because, nobody actually came up with original ideas during that time. And just because people are really invested in these formats and saying like, yo, there are all of these cool things that exist in these formats. There was a Level Up Dragons deck that topped one of the recent Reaper format events. And so the GX, I think, is one of those things where, like, I think the problem with GX wasn't that there was cool stuff potentially in the wings for competitive. I think the problem was that there was not a lot of coverage to go around, and there was not a lot of access to cards, and there wasn't a lot of access to labbing. And so people didn't really get much chance to think critically or outside the box when it came to the game. And so just the safe move was to invest in the cards you knew were going to be successful. And things like, Breaker the Magical Warrior, Spirit Reaper, Cyber Dragons, things like that. And then work with what you've got. And now that we have this incredible series of communities of people who dedicate a lot of time and energy and have full access to the game and to each other to practice and lab things, that we're getting to see a lot of really cool things.
I know that if you are interested in some of the GX era stuff, if you go to Joe Giorlando's channel, YGO History, and check out that interview earlier that we did a few weeks ago if you haven't already. If you go to Joe Giorlando's channel, he has some really cool deck profiles from like that 2006 Chaos Return format. And it's a lot of historic deck profiles, But it's interesting to see, like, if you go back and look at those deck profiles versus the stuff that's topping, like, currently when people play those formats, it's very different.
Very different, yeah.
So, but that is something else that you do, right? You said you do a lot of Time Wizard and Junior Journey. Is that the bulk of your Twitch streams, or do you do other stuff too?
That is the bulk of my Twitch streams. My last Twitch stream, I decided that I was going to break into the meta. I did an entire Sword Soul 10E combo. I did one. I made it through a whole turn. I put up 3 negates. Maybe it was I put up a number of negates. And I only had to restart the combo like once in order to make sure that it wasn't, an absolute misplay. So I do the meta. Really, I do mostly do retro format things because I have not yet had the time to break back into advanced competitive play like I used to do. But I am always a proponent of advanced format and meta play and competitive play. Because that's what really made the game special for me when I was at the peak of my play.
Right. So let's talk about your time playing the game. Let's back it up a little bit. And I want to ask you where you kind of got your start in the game and where your love of the game came from, if you will.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a weird question to answer because I've come in and out of the game quite a few times, and it's not necessarily for lack of love of the game or anything. It's just like other life things. So where I got started in Yu-Gi-Oh really depends on at what point you think I was like really into the game. So my very first introduction to the game was actually back in 2003. And was it actually 2002 only had Legend of Blue Eyes, right? It was like 2002 Legend of Blue Eyes, and then at like the very end of 2002 was the Yugi and Kaiba starter decks. Is that correct?
So, LOB was March 1st. Structure decks were the end of starter decks were the end of March. Metal Raiders was June, and Magic Ruler at the time was October, I think. We actually had like 3 sets and tournament packs that released at that time.
Okay, yeah. So what I remember is that I was in 3rd grade, and my friend Tom and I used to do make-believe games on the playground every once in a while. And there was this thing that we called it the armor game. It was this there was a lot to it, and I probably couldn't get to the half of what our childhood wonder could come up with at the time. And he said that one time he was like, okay, the reward for our quest this time is this powerful dragon. He pulls out a copy of Komori Dragon, a card I'm fairly sure 90% of your audience has forgotten ever existed. It is a vanilla 1400 attack point, I think, dragon monster. He handed it to me, and I thought, yep, purple guy, weird kind of worm-shaped tail, triangular head.
Kaiba starter deck.
Yes, it was. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I thought it was sick. And I grew up in this like tiny town out in the middle of nowhere in kind of South Central Washington. And so I didn't have a huge amount of access to the game, but I immediately got into it. I was like, what is this? Where does this come from? And so my friend Tom and I got into it as much as you can when the nearest Walmart is like a half an hour drive away.
Dude, trust me, I understand. I grew up somewhere where the nearest Walmart, the nearest stoplight was half an hour away. I get it.
Yep. I definitely feel you there. Yeah, and so we would buy every volume of the manga at the book fairs at our school. I nearly mailed out an envelope full of like $30 in $1 bills to get my subscription to Beckett Yu-Gi-Oh! Collector before my mom caught me trying to sneak out the front door and wrote a check for it instead. And so I was like glued to the pages of Beckett Yu-Gi-Oh! Collector for that time.
Did you watch
and
a lot?
I did, yeah. So in my hometown in Washington, the anime aired at 2 times. One I definitely couldn't get away with because my parents didn't want me watching it, which was like at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. And the other, and this was my secret to success, was on Tuesday mornings, it aired at 4 a.m. And so if I was very quiet sneaking into the living room, I could watch it on like the lowest volume level possible. And I could get away with it. I remember very specifically watching the episode where Yugi beats Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon by infecting it with Mammoth Graveyard.
Oh my gosh, where they're standing on top of the Pegasus
Where they're
castle.
standing up on the castle, yep, and Kaiba like pulls the cheapest move to win the game. Yeah,
he threatens to do unspeakable things to himself.
Yes, he does. I very vividly remember being under a blanket in my living room and it being pitch black outside, and because it was in the winter and watching that. And I remember my grandma provided me my first critical mass of cards, which was a Kaiba starter deck, as you know, as all the OGs started with. I remember finding my first booster pack and being like in awe that this was a thing that you could get at a 7-Eleven. I pulled Sangha of the Thunder out of my first booster pack ever. I thought I was the coolest thing ever. But my friend Tom, who had introduced me to the game, had rich parents, and so he immediately slapped me with his OCG copy of Dragon Master Knight.
Tom is the
anyway, so that was. Oh no, he was great. I mean, he played as fairly as 9-year-old children ever do, and it was a great time. We spent a lot of time with it. We had fun watching the anime together because when I stayed the night at his house, I could get away with watching it. And so yeah, you would just sneak away whenever we were at Walmart or Freddy's to grab packs from the electronics section because that's where they had them. And that was Yu-Gi-Oh! For me for the first few years. And part of what really excites me about getting into things specifically like Reaper format is there are all these cards that I always looked at in Beckett Yu-Gi-Oh! Collector as a kid, and all these decks that they used to talk about that I saw as these like incredible rare treasures, and now I have access to them, and it's really cool for me. And then I quit for reasons I don't actually particularly remember until a couple of friends and I in high school, I want to say junior year, while I was in a play, made a comment that like kind of as an offhand joke that we had a bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh cards sitting around at our houses. And because for any of you who are ever in theater, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There were hours where there was nothing to do, where we had to be present, but there was nothing to do. And so we put together these absolute jank tier decks, as you do. And we played it kind of as a joke until I went and got my rear end absolutely handed to me at a tournament at an anime convention. And it was true love from there. My very first deck that I played with any kind of competitiveness was a Cyber Dragon FTK deck, or OTK deck, using like Overload Fusion and Power Bond and things like that, which I got to like second place at another anime convention tournament. The height of competitive play right there. And then it was X-Sabers. X-Sabers was my first real deck, and that's when I started Yu-Gi tubing. You can actually see in my earliest videos that like my parents had I was literally living in my parents' basement, because I was like 15 years old.
Right.
Yeah, and I got into playing competitively and Yu-Gi tubing because I just kept encountering new people. I happened to go to a locals with a bunch of people who had like randomly won like SJCs and things like that. And so they fostered a really cool competitive environment. We'd stay up all night at the local 24-hour Subway. And yeah, that's really how I got into the game. And I've been off and on since then, largely because I have a lot of other things going on in my life, and I have some kind of parallel ambitions that have come in and out. But there's always been somebody, in this case, most recently, Alex Simo, who managed to talk me into getting back into the game, and I'm glad I did most recently.
Yeah, I think my story echoes yours quite a bit. I know we haven't really talked about this before. Yeah, I grew up. I was like born and raised in a very major city. I was born and raised in New Orleans, and
Oh, nice.
yeah. Well, I like played and grew up with the game until this like giant, massive natural disaster hit, and I kind of lost everything. So yeah, 2005, rough year. So we moved up to the northern part of the state, and we lived in basically a tree, and because we were surrounded by trees, because that's all there was trees. So
yeah, I know how that is. Yeah.
Oh, it was culture shock, all right. Going from my dad going hunting like twice a year, driving like 2 hours to go find a place to hunt, to being like, oh look, there's a deer in the backyard. It's a very big difference.
Yeah.
So we, going from there to there was for me, after a couple of years of like bouncing around here and there, I settled at a school, and I joined, of course, the band. And of course, in the band, I meet Caleb, and we ended up like hitting it off over Yu-Gi-Oh! And I was in late middle school, he was in early high school, and we've been friends ever since. And whether we were playing the game or not, we played up until right before Duelist Alliance format, and we got out until we got back into the game, and about 8 months later started the podcast. So
Nice.
yeah, it's kind of funny how stories echo each other sometimes.
Definitely. You and I had kind of the reverse. I went from a small town to a big city, and you went from a big city to a small town, and managed to end up in a,
I still drive an hour weekly for locals.
Wow.
Dedication. Yeah. And you got to remember, like, people are like, well, it's like, and I'm sure you can relate to this. People are like, it's so far for locals and cards, sure, but, you can just go online and play online. Nope. Not at that time.
Yep. Yeah, playing online was hoodwinking my family into letting me browse on, oh man, I'm trying to think of what some of the sites were back in the day that you got cards off of. A lot of them don't exist. Like Pojo used to have like a hot premier place to get your Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Toy Wiz was the big thing for a while. You got your cards off of Toy Wiz.
I remember, I don't remember, but I've heard many stories about like the competitive scene being on Duelist grounds, and I was like,
yep.
Oof, that was before my time.
Yeah.
And it was funny was, I don't know if this was around the same time that you were like trying to get into competitive, but I was like trying to get into competitive, and they were like, and it's like right around the time Dueling Network came out.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yep, I definitely remember that.
So here's the real question.
Okay.
You say you lived in a small town.
Uh-huh.
Do you have high-speed internet to where you could actually play Dueling Network?
Oh, no. By the time Dueling Network existed, I was no longer in a small town. I think my first duel simulator was the Kaiba Corp. The Kaiba Corp duel, the one where you had to you basically like had to code your commands into it to make it work.
Wow.
I remember specifically there was this user, Atomic Slap if you're out there, was like the biggest troll of the server. It was, always in all caps. All their dual lobbies had the word slap in them. I remember that one very vividly. I was very grateful to have Dueling Network come out.
Well, yeah, so you're a couple of years older than me, I think. So when Dueling Network came out, I was still like in early high school. So I was still living with my parents, and there was no high-speed internet at the time. And buddy, I got so many game losses from internet not working. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, the struggle.
Yeah. So, around what time did you find yourself getting out of the game and now back into it through being coerced?
Yeah, I blame Aleximo for both of them. So the very first time, besides 2006 when I moved and I started middle school and things like that, once I was actually really into the game, the first time that I kind of quit was in 2015 when I started attending college. I was not. So 2015, I say when I started attending college because I went to community college for my first 2 years.
Okay.
So 2015 was probably, was like officially my junior year, although nobody in my major graduated in 4 years. So I went off to college. I went off to university in 2015. And one of the glories of college is you just discover a huge number of things that you want to do with your life. Yep. That like, as soon as you get there, you're just like, so for me, I started doing dance. I was very into that. I had already started doing journalism things, and getting into politics and economics as a subject. And so I really went hard on that. I started working out for the first time in my life. And it just kind of fell by the wayside. I had all these exciting things. I had all these friends that I was hanging out with, and I didn't know anybody in Bellingham, where I was going to college, who played Yu-Gi-Oh! It took me a very long time to even find a locals up there. And so I just kind of, people will remember from that time, I just kind of disappeared. I didn't tell people that I was busy. I just kept like meaning to make a video, and then I just never did. So it was just like one of those things. Life just happens. And I was very excited, and I'm glad that I had that time period where I wasn't glued to the internet, where I was out and about. And before that, it wasn't that I was like on the internet constantly. I had a lot of opportunities to be in person and play Yu-Gi-Oh! That's one of the wonderful things about this as a game, as opposed to a video game is like you necessarily are in a space with other people where you're socializing. But I digress. Anyway, so I was really excited. I'm glad that I had that time. And I had been in 2014, I had been a mermail player. I was very into water as a deck. It was just a blast. One of the, if you ever want to try a deck in a retro format that's going to make you better at the game, mermail will always be the one to work with. And it was really what made me want to continue playing competitively. And Aleximo kept poking me whenever something new came out. He was like, they brought Dragoons back to 2. I was like, haha, that's funny, Simo. And then Neptibus the Atlantean Prince was announced. And for all this time, us mermail players had been making do with Gen X Undyne as our starter. We had to run Gen X, we had to run this awful vanilla that you would draw like 25% of your games and immediately lose the game. And we'd been saying like, man, if we could get like Gen X Undyne, but if it just like gains 100 attack, we'll be happy. So we don't have to run Gen X controller. And then they announce Neptibus, and they're like, oh, this card does literally everything the deck could possibly want. It is everything you asked for and more. And I was like, okay, I gotta try this. So in late 2016, and for those of you familiar with my stuff, yes, this was ABC format when I got back into the game. I decided to go to a regional for the first time in a long time. And I got my invite. I did better than I'd ever done at a competitive event, and I was like, yeah, this is it. And I brought my Mermail deck, which was a blast. I have a couple of funny memories about that deck, but it was just a really great time, and I was like, yes, I remember why I played competitively. Just that rush of being like really on top of your game, at seeing something you've practiced a million times come together. Just it was an absolute blast. And Alex said, yo, I'm gonna be in Seattle for YCS Seattle. Do you want to go to YCS together? And I was like, hell yeah. And we went to YCS Seattle together. It was some of my best memories of my entire life was hanging out with Alex at YCS Seattle and playing that event. Fun fact, he got a feature match with Billy Brake that event. It was one of the first times Konami ever featured a creator instead of a famous player in a feature match. It was very exciting for us. Anyway, so I played that. I was like, oh yeah, I'm back into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And then senior year took over, and graduation took over, and I moved, and I got into a lot of other things. I started doing climate activism, became a huge part of my life. And once again, Yu-Gi-Oh! Just kind of faded off to the sidelines. And I, of course, thought about it every once in a while. Every year, I buy a set of decks from like one of my old retro formats. So I have both versions of the Dragon Ruler format in paper. I put together Abyss Rising was one of the first formats I put together. So it was always kind of in the back of my mind. And there was always this voice in the back of my mind, and that voice was Alex Simo on Facebook, messaging me every 2 months, being like, yo, you gonna get back into the game? Hey, this Mermail deck topped. he was like, he knew when to bring in the Mermails. And eventually he was like, you know what, I just want to do something together. I want to collaborate together. We talked about doing sealed things together, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, I want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yu-Gi-Tube again, and doing a sealed event, which is something I'd never done before. I'd never done sealed play before. Just sounded like so much fun, and it was at a time in 2020 where the city I live in now, I don't know a lot of people, and it's been hard to break into social circles for obvious reasons in the last 2 years. And I was just really excited. I remember loving the community online, and specifically with creators. I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Creators have just like a special level of community that I really appreciate. And I'm so glad that I got back into it. And that brings us here today, and that's my life story. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Well, I mean, I think we all have stories like that, though. I mean, it's always a friend that brings us back into the game, right?
Definitely, yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about your journey through content creation, if you will. I know you said back in the day you did a little bit of Yu-Gi-Tubing. You kind of dabbled here and there. But the thing that I want to talk about is really Junior journey. So was this your concoction?
Yeah, I was just kind of at in the throes of working with Sealed Showdown and looking at like DM era Yu-Gi-Oh! And I was working on this thing that's actually that is an upcoming project for me that I call the Millennium Dual Kit, which is this project I decided to put together because I was inspired by seeing Reaper format come into popularity. Where the Millennium Dual Kit is this thing that I want to put together that's like all of early Yu-Gi-Oh! In a box. Something where a person can play all sorts of formats from like Playground Yu-Gi-Oh! To competitive GOAT format and Reaper format, and have all of these things together such that like two people who want to play Yu-Gi-Oh can have the full experience. And I want to make it like the best, most fun, not just like cards, but also like art and callbacks to like 2003 through 2005 Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'd been coming up with all these aesthetic ideas. So I'm like getting all these cards together. I'm putting together a game guide a la like early 2000s Pokemon game guides with like lore and art and things like that. So I've been planning this out, and I see this channel called Chaos Magician, who commented on Simo's videos a couple of times, who did a really like in-depth series about early Yu-Gi-Oh, which is really cool for a number of reasons. My favorite thing about Chaos Magician as a historical Yu-Gi-Oh channel is they have like some of the products from back then, some of the OCG products. I remember there was this one that was like really endearing to me. There was this early like Duelist Kingdom dual kit type of thing that came with like star chips and like really early like pre-OCG like actual game Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And the cards were like worn down. Like you could tell that there was somebody who really loved this thing and played with it as a kid. They had a life point counter that had like notes from their actual duels with friends. It was like the coolest thing in the world. And as they were talking about this thing, they talked about early versions of Yu-Gi-Oh, which early Yu-Gi-Oh was like really early Yu-Gi-Oh, true earlier Yu-Gi-Oh, like in 1999. Was just like the absolute Wild West. Konami came out with a new set of, and it wasn't always just Konami, it was like all these different game production companies were coming out with their own rules for Yu-Gi-Oh! Every time there was a new video game, the game worked entirely differently. And I saw they talked about the official card game rules and the junior rules. And I thought they were the funniest thing ever because they were like a skeleton of Yu-Gi-Oh as it existed now. And folks who are familiar with Junior Journey will know a lot of these rules. You could like, some of the early versions you had to like set spell cards for a turn before you could activate them. You of course didn't have tribute summons. You just normal summoned your Dark Magician. With no monsters on the board, attacked for game. And I thought this was the funniest thing. So I tweeted about it. It was just like, can you imagine if Konami tried to make the game of Yu-Gi-Oh continue as it was, if they hadn't like seen the writing on the wall for their game and made this big decision to make this change for its longevity? Like, could Yu-Gi-Oh have been a playable card game? And a couple of my Twitter followers, namely Sophie, apparently, who is a mainstay in the junior format community, was like, yo, this would actually be hilarious. And we were speculating on like something that happened really recently, like normal summon Debok as a thing you could do. Like, as like the tier 0 strategy, like Blue Eyes White Dragon actually being the most powerful monster in the game. And I was like, okay, this is the most hilarious thing ever. And what I need is to inflict it on other human beings. Like, I want to play this, but I want other people to have to go through playing this format. And it was right about this time when people were starting to realize that I existed. I, of course, had my diehards from back in like 2014, but most of the community, the community has grown so much since I used to play. So to a lot of people, I was just this absolute no name. And MBT on stream was like, as like a throwaway comment, was like, yeah, he seems pretty chill. I definitely do a collab with him. And so I was like, yo, MBT, you said you want to do a collab. I have a really terrible idea for a collab. And the rest was history. A really fun fact, actually. So the premise of Junior Journey is that climate change destroyed the world because people were too focused on reading excessively complex Yu-Gi-Oh cards to actually, specifically Nirvana High Paladin. to actually pay attention and make the changes that need to be made to stop the apocalypse. He did not tell me about this premise before we filmed the first episode. So he's making all these references to the premise of the series, and I'm like going along with it. I'm like, I have no idea. This guy's going crazy with me right now, but like I'm having a good time, and it was really funny. I watched it. I was like, okay, that's actually sick. Like that was way better than anything I could think of. So that premise was all his idea. As you can tell from the fact that I have no idea what's going on in the first episode.
That's really funny because you say you had a background in working in climate change and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. You probably came up with all the intro to the junior journey. Nope.
I had no idea it was coming.
That's actually even funnier.
Yeah, it was a blast. I'm very glad that Hardleg agreed to be one of our first guests. I was like, he's also somebody who'd be really into this. I was like, if MBT thinks this is the worst idea ever and refuses to do it, I'm sure Hardleg would try it out. So I think his presence in a format that was very conducive to just his entire existence was probably very helpful in getting the series up off the ground.
Is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to in this series? Any particular formats, time frames, things like that?
You know, every time I think I'm looking forward to something, I actually have no idea what's going on. It turns out, like, we could not have predicted that Pac-Man would take over the world in 2003. That, like, Guardian Sphinx would be the terror of the format. So that was really cool. I'm really interested to see how this affects GX, because there were a lot of cards with very powerful effects at high level in GX that were never played because they were, gated behind, 7 to 8 stars. They're like monsters that negate spell cards. There are, there's Ancient Gear Golem, which is immune to Sakuretsu armor, has got 3 grand. So I'm really excited to see GX from the perspective of the junior rules, especially. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. I think the 2004 format that folks are, I'm sure, already like leagues ahead of us as we speak. Like as of like over the course of us recording this podcast, I'm sure they have developed and destroyed like 5 different meta games. So I'm really excited to see what they come up with and what we come up with for that. To answer your question, it's hard to say what I'm looking forward to the most because I'm just like absolutely blown away every time we think we figured it out.
Yeah, it's really funny. Since we've started this podcast, there's been roughly, 50 plus messages sent in the junior format channel. Yeah.
Yep.
They're going ham. So, I think that some of the cool innovations that come with some of the cool innovations that come with these alternative formats are really interesting. Is this something that you could ever see being played in paper? Like, if people decide, like, oh, junior format, like 2008, it's just like a great retro format to play, actually. Do you think that people would, like, ever pick it up in paper and actually build it?
See that? It's funny, the premise of this series was supposed to be, like, displaying how absolutely garbage these rules were. They're like, it's really a good thing that Konami like figured it out and decided to go for it, just because these rules are just not at all, the game is not balanced around these rules, but it's actually turned out to be really fun. And I think one of my favorite things about it is it's a way to play constructed with a full card pool, with the actual like full rules of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game in a simplified way. And Konami's been coming out with a lot of cool ways of simplifying Yu-Gi-Oh! Things like speed duels and dual links, rush duels, things like that limit the card pool, that make the rules simpler, things like that. And Junior, I think, fits really well into that it is a very simplified version of the game, but not simplified in a way that takes away the creativity and fun of it. And you've got the full card pool to work with. And so you can really innovate and play around with it. So I can see potentially certain formats being really popular for folks who want to have a casual game and make constructed things, but not have to worry, not have to worry about working their brains too hard. If it's been a long day and you just want to unwind and you don't want to, play sword soul combos all night, that it's something that you can get into and have pretty low barriers to entry. So we'll see. It really depends on if MPT and I manage to actually ever balance the game. But it's definitely something that I encourage people to try for themselves, to start their own junior journeys and try playing God with the ability to create your own ban lists and things like that. Because it's a really fun way to interact with the game casually and potentially even probably a pretty good way for new players to get into it.
I agree. Although it is notable that, you can still do a full sword soul combo and only activate like one spell.
That's a good point. That's fair. Junior format 2021 probably won't look terribly different or 2022.
Yeah. I was thinking about that and I was like, man, junior format 2020 is literally just gonna be tri-brigade combos.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. That's the thing. Konami at some point figured out balancing Yu-Gi-Oh! And when they did that, they realized that making high-level monsters didn't properly balance them. It just made them unplayable, unless there was a low-level thing that tutored it out. And so they started balancing the game around that. So I think the most impactful part of the junior rules is going to turn out to be the one spell and one trap per turn one. Which I think is going to, like Spellbooks, is going to be an absolutely unplayable deck under those circumstances. And so we'll see what that rule does, because Konami didn't successfully balance around just one spell and one trap per turn. But yeah, you're right that there are certain formats where that's probably not going to make a huge difference. Rejuve rulers. You'd activate Super Rejuvenation and maybe like a 7-star sword during your turn. But other than that, you could already basically normal summon level 7 monster.
Yeah. And it's going to be really interesting to see the turns that the format takes when you get into like the Synchro and Xyz eras. Because once you get into those other extra deck mechanics, it really changes the dynamic of a lot of it because there's so much power accessible from the extra deck. I'm really excited to see where the format kind of see how long it stays diverged, because like when you really think about it, it's like two parallel lines, except one of them is not quite parallel. It's just like slightly tilted. I feel like eventually the two lines are going to intersect somewhere, right?
Yeah, and I'm excited to find out where the point is at which we are basically playing, the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG again.
I'm going to be honest. I've really taken a shining to the format, though. I've really, really come to like it a lot, mainly because water is a playable constructed deck. Like Levia, Dragon, Daedalus, water is a playable deck. That's all I'm saying. It's still good. Everybody check it out. It is.
I think without chaos taking over the format, it's probably even better because, the things that made that deck good were obviously Sinister Serpent. Painful Choice into triple Sinister Serpent was obviously a very good combo. But what made the deck really good was actually like Daedalus, Tribe Infecting Virus, and Abyss Soldier, which you still have full access to and are all searchable by Witch of the Black Forest, which, for those of you who aren't familiar with the format, there are some ridiculous cards that we have not hit on the Forbidden and Limited list yet.
Pot of Greed is at 3.
Pot of Greed is at 3. Delinquent Duo is at 3, and nobody plays it. It was a big tech moment when I brought in the Forceful Sentry. Like, that was a big deal that I played the Forceful Sentry.
Yeah, because you run into a situation where, like, sure, those cards are, like, incredibly powerful and stuff, but, like, honestly, when you can only activate one spell trap per turn, like, which would you rather do? Activate Pot of Greed or activate Painful Choice?
Yeah, or, like, Yeah, activate Pot of Greed and get, some monsters that you might be able to summon or a spell that you can't activate that turn. Or you could Monster Reborn your Dark Magician of Chaos back.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, it was funny to see the decks literally just not even playing Pot of Greed. Like, it's at 3, we're not playing it.
yeah, I played it at 1, which was kind of copium.
Yeah, it was
during the 2004 episode. Yeah. It was literally just there to get me to painful choice fast.
Yeah. So, really interesting. So, I want to talk a little bit also about some of the retro formats that you showcase on your Twitch stream. I know that you're a big fan of the Abyss Rising format. Are there any other ones that kind of speak to you?
Yeah, I would say that the 3 formats that stand out the most to me. And this is kind of a thing that I do, is I find things that are a little bit of hidden gems, things people either don't remember or are kind of muddled in with formats that people really didn't like. And my 3 favorites are actually some of the ones that exemplify that the most. So Abyss Rising, phenomenal format, absolutely incredible, and oftentimes people forget about it because 2012 sucked for Yu-Gi-Oh!
True.
A lot of the time. But like, early fall 2012 was a fantastic time, extremely diverse, so many cool different decks. So that's one of them. 2016, October of 2016, right after Structure Deck Seto Kaiba came out. There's really cool, the first version of ABC format before like Totally Awesome was released and stuff like that. Phenomenal format. Things like Mermail was obviously competitive. That's what I played at the time, but there are a million really cool versions of ABC as a deck. Blue Eyes was still competitive. There was a Shadow Train deck. Metal Foes had just started to come into play. I'm just looking over my shoulder at all of the paper decks that I have from that format to see if I forgot anything.
Your stream on the Abyss Rising format is what inspired me to go out and buy an entire Max Rarity Geargia deck.
Nice. Yeah, Geargia was a great one. That was a great deck. So yeah, Abyss Rising ABC format in 2016, and the one that I get in the most arguments with people about was the 2013 Ravine Ruler format. I think that was one of the best times for competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Ever. For a number of reasons. Of course, as every format does, it had its flaws, and those flaws were namely returned from the different dimension in the Sixth Sense, which Konami in their infinite wisdom released during the Dragon Ruler format. But other than that, you had a million different versions of the Dragon Ruler deck. Like, there was no consensus about the best way to run Dragon Rulers, and people came up with the wildest stuff. It was like absolute cloud cuckoo land for Dragon Rulers. You had Dragoonity Rulers, you had Tidal Mermail, you had like Plant Rulers, made famous by our good friend Nim Nim. You had all these weird teched out versions, but Dragon Rulers had some very, very specific weaknesses at the time. That people started to figure out, and so people came up with some of the coolest rogue and anti-meta decks. There was a Thunder Family deck that topped an ARG circuit series that was really cool. There was a Fire Fist deck where you would go Coach Soldier Wolfbark into, I want to say, Fire Fist Caribou, which was a tuner, which could make Crimson Blader. So it was like a searchable combo that made Crimson Blader off of one card. That was super cool. There was an event where like Evil Swarms got second place and Constellar got first place. There was so much cool stuff during this format. Karakuri won an event too.
I think everything was at 1 at that time, right?
So the Dragon Rulers, the big Dragon Rulers were at 3 still. The format that limited the big Dragon Rulers was March of 2014, which was also a phenomenal format because that was when like Boojins were kind of the black stain on the format, but you also had like, this was just pre-hat, so you had like Sylvans were really powerful. Fire Fist had 2 really cool different versions of it. There were again a bunch of different versions of Mermails. Geargia, Karakuri Geargia and Pure Karakuri were both really powerful during that time.
Because Gear is a heck of a card.
Gear really and truly is a heck of a card.
And it did not get enough chance to shine under full Dragon Rulers because it was released in the same set as all the Dragon Rulers.
Yep. Yeah. That set really did take a lot of things out. That got resurrected later. The World Prophecy was a really cool deck that existed. Inzectors made kind of a comeback during that time. So that's a really cool format. I haven't gotten to explore it yet. It's one of the ones that I want to do on stream sometime in the near future, but that was a really good one too.
So, what are you, I forgot what I was going to say. I forgot my next question. Oh no. Yeah, I don't know. I just all the way forgot my next question. Wow.
Happens to me all the time, frequently mid-sentence.
Yeah. Folks, this is why you don't record late the night before the episode is supposed to premiere. That's why you don't do it. What I do want to do before I forget, though, is I want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, ETB Games. ETB is our local in Alexandria, Louisiana, and if you are interested in anything Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, Digimon the card game, DBZ Super, whatever, Cardfight Vanguard, whatever card game you're interested in, they have the things to support that. They have all your accessories. They have binders, sleeves, everything, deck boxes, everything that you need to play the card games that you love, as well as the D&D guidebooks, the figurines, the table mats. They have all of your tabletop accessories and needs, and if you are interested, you can check them out at the link in the description below. Sorry, I forgot to do that earlier, and I'm kind of paid to do that, so I need to do that.
Glad you did it. Yeah. Good to support local game shops.
Of course. So is there any particular deck that kind of speaks to you now in the current advanced format that you're kind of looking forward to playing a little bit?
That's a great question. Every once in a while I see something, I'm like, yeah, that's right up my alley. The problem is the decks that I like to play when I was playing competitively were very, very difficult decks. Like, I loved the Dragon Ruler Mirror Match. I loved Mermails. All these things that require, like, massive lines of thinking, which I am not capable of doing in the slightest with current advanced format Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I've been out of the game for so long. So I want to say things, I want to say, like, Virtual World looked like it was really cool.
Wow,
like a format ago. What's that?
You do pick the big brain decks.
Yeah, like there's so I'm a little bit of a simp for Synchron decks. And so the Stardust Synchron deck that MBT showed off on 10-minute testing looks like a blast, but is far too big brain. And so that's very exciting. This is why I started playing Sword Souls, because it's a synchro deck, but it's got like one combo it does every turn. And so I'm like, I can do that. I can play a Sword Soul combo and not have to remember all these different lines. But ultimately, the ones that I'm drawn to are those ones that have all those diverging decision points, which is really a self-destructive tendency that I have.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with liking the big brain decks. I just personally can't play them.
I probably
can't. I spent the last year
either.
Playing Tri-Brigade. I don't do big brain.
Like I said, it took me half an hour to do a single Sword Soul 10 line. So I'm gonna get there. I do want to get to that point where I understand the TCG well enough to play some of those decks. Maybe get to pick up that Synchron deck. I was spending a little too much money earlier on an old foiled out max rarity junk doppel deck. It's probably not max rarity, and I was thinking, I could just pick up some Stardust Synchrons while I'm here, and so we'll see. That might be in my future. It's certainly not a tier 1 deck right now, but I am looking forward to what comes out.
So, as a returning player to the game, what are some of the resources that you have found yourself using to catch up on some of the different things in the game? Because I know that, like I can just speak from personal experience on this. When you come back into the game, especially when when I came back into the game, it was Adamancipator and Eldritch Synchro, and I was just lost. So when coming back into the game, what resources have you found yourself trying to kind of take advantage of to help get back up to speed?
That's a great question.
I'm full of them.
So, honest to goodness, the progression series has helped a lot. And I say that because the natural way that the format works is they introduce new cards a bit at a time, and they only play a few of them at a time. And there are these ones that are like, going to be fairly common threads throughout it. So once they got into the Link era, it was really helpful for me to see them play these cards one at a time. And so I'd be able to I'd be like, okay, I understand the nightmare monsters now, and I understand these things. So that was great. Honestly, community memes has also been very helpful because, there comes a point at which a card gets memed enough that you just understand what it does. Like, I don't think I have ever looked up Mystic Mine, and yet I know the effect of Mystic Mine because people make so many memes about it. And so just like seeing there are common discussion threads throughout the community and kind of keeping my ear to that. As far as actual resources, the way that I always learn things competitively, and the way that I'm kind of getting back into things now, is I would look at a pretty basic deck list, one that seems kind of representative of what people tend to be playing, and I read the cards, and then I watch deck profiles to listen to people explaining why they play different versions of the deck or different ratios or things like that. And I think that really solidifies for me what these cards do. Listening to people explain how they interact with each other and how different ratios interact with each other. So that's what I'm currently doing with Sword Soul. And so it's really helpful for me to first get familiar with the real basics of the deck, the nitty gritty, and then hear really good players talk about the deck and why they make decisions and why they think people are total noobs because they make different decisions. Obviously that kind of language isn't great, but when they talk about things that they think are bad ideas and stuff like that, you could be like, okay, I understand your reasoning, and that gets you thinking from the different angles of the deck. And so that's something that I do a lot. So I love watching deck profiles. Combo videos I don't find particularly helpful, because they're really one of those things that's in one ear, out the other. And so I'd rather hear people explain cards to me and then have me figure out combos, at least initially, while I'm messing with the deck on Dueling Book. So that's how I do that. And eventually, maybe combo videos once I feel really familiar with it. But if I were to suggest to people how they can get back into the game, watching people play, choosing a deck that sounds like it's fun, or that even I advocate for sometimes choosing the deck that's meta, that has the art that you like the most, that you want to spend a lot of time looking at, because if you don't know anything about the current game, you're not going to know what deck suits your style. But if you choose one that you just kind of like and enjoy, you're going to have fun learning about it, and it's just a thing to get yourself started and break out of the mental block of getting back into the game, which is part of how I started with Sword Soul, alongside everybody complaining about how boring Sword Soul is.
Yeah, definitely. I personally, I looked for the Xyz deck in the format because I remembered Xyz and I knew how they actually worked, So just having a deck that centralized a mechanic that I understood just worked really well for me.
Yeah, definitely.
But at the same time, I quickly transitioned into a Link heavy deck because it was a mechanic that I didn't understand and that I wanted to be able to understand in depth. So I guess there's two sides to that coin.
Yeah, definitely. I also advocate for once you've got a deck you're pretty comfortable with, and once you're getting into the game, go after those scary decks. They're always going, and this is how I got into Mermails originally, was there are decks that people are going to be talking about being really hard, requiring a lot of thinking. And once you're up to speed on the current, we'll say, philosophy of the game, because the philosophy of the game changes every few years. So when I was playing, it was a matter of like tempo was a really big deal, and being able to have counters and outs for boss monsters and things like that. But now it's like about managing your once per turns. What resources have you used this turn that are exhausted for the turn? And like watching your opponent, because hand traps are such a big deal. What is your opponent using a hand trap for? What are they like not using it for? So like, what does that tell you about your hand? That kind of thing. So like, once you learn that kind of philosophy about the game with a deck, going after those decks that are like, okay, that seems cool, but it's probably a little too hard for me, I fully advocate for it, because we have like, we have these incredible tools available to us. We have these oftentimes actually fairly welcoming communities who are interested in learning about the game, who are like really invested in these decks. We have all these tools available to us to learn things that are really hard, and then just practicing it and wrapping your brain around it. You don't have to win all of your locals with it right away. You can mess with it while you have your competitive deck that, gets you by, that's about the speed you're at now. But trying for those scary things is a lot of how you find yourself like building confidence in the game.
Yeah, for sure. Are there particular channels or communities or anything that you would like harken back to when you're looking for specific advice, specific, anything, you know what I mean? Rulings, whatever.
Every deck is going to have its like particular proponent and person who knows it the best. But I think in general, I have stayed subscribed to Slim Yu-Gi-Oh for the last like 7 years of the game. And I think that the deck profiles that they have over there are frequently a good like amount of explanation to them. So when it just comes to looking at what people are playing, what the deck profiles are, they're great folks. I think that's the one that comes off to the top of my brain. There are going to be Discord servers for pretty much everything. I don't have any in particular. One person I do want to shout out, because I'm sure there's somebody who doesn't think of themselves as being like a competitive resource, but somebody who's great to watch their stream, especially if you're just getting back into the game, is Shiggy's Crystal Abundance. Because her streams, when she tries out new decks, and talks themselves through them, learns about them, how they work on stream. It's a very good environment for if you're just getting back into Yu-Gi-Oh, and it's like scary to have somebody like taking it at an exploratory speed and learning about things and messing with the deck. I absolutely am a huge advocate for Shiggy's stream for that.
Also,
and that's just a matter of
also
like
a previous
emotional
guest of
speed.
the podcast, and you can find her episode below.
Yeah. That's how I knew you were legit. If she wants to talk to somebody, then I'm happy to talk to them. So yeah, definitely a proponent of her stream. MBT's videos, his whole thing is explaining decks and how they work, and frequently they involve talking about cards that have been in the game for forever. See, his current invoked 10-minute testing. So I really appreciate how much he does with just exploring different decks. And of course he does a lot of like jank alchemy, as I like to call it, in his content. But I think he does a really great job of explaining his things. And so as a person who hasn't really broken deeply into the content creator world when it comes to competitive Yu-Gi-Oh currently, those are the folks that I spend the most of my time with.
Yeah, I understand that. MBT is, when I found his 10-minute testings, that's how I got into and found his entire community. So I definitely understand that. So, I think that will pretty much wrap us up for today, though. Do you have any closing thoughts, plugs, anything like that?
No, I think I've talked enough. No,
Oh,
I
dude,
really
it's a
do encourage
podcast.
folks.
We're allowed to talk.
Oh yeah, I'm glad. Then you invited the right person on. I really do encourage folks to check out Junior Journey if you have not already. It's a blast. It's one of the most ridiculous shows on YugiTube.
It really is. It's great.
It's a lot of fun. Try out Junior format. And yeah, I would say one of the things, my final closing statement is that you don't have to go hard 100% of the time. Yu-Gi-Oh's about having a good time, and oftentimes going to the people who you enjoy for content, and who you have a fun time with, and the same thing goes for like playing the decks that you enjoy and have a good time with, are going to make you better because you're, having a good time, paying attention. And so you don't always have to be you don't have to be on the grind with everything you do.
That is absolutely correct. Yeah, there's a lot of truth in that. It's okay to like learn the deck for a few days, then take a break for a few days, then come back a week later and just like learn it at your own pace and do things at your own pace. Don't try to jump head first back into the game and like quickly create a podcast. It doesn't work.
No experience being spoken from there, I'm sure.
Yeah, no. I mean, listen, I'm just saying sometimes if you go down that path and you jump quickly back into the game and then make your own podcast, you're going to spend your first like 20 episodes saying things that are just factually incorrect. So be careful. That's all I'm saying.
I've been doing that on screen for the last 15 years, so you're doing all right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Again, everybody, if you want to find RJ, if you want to, keep an eye on his journey as a YugiTuber and content creator throughout all of the Yu-Gi-Oh spectrum, you can find him, of course, on Simo's channel every Wednesday or Tuesday. If you're a rare level patron, you can get that a day early. And that is the Sealed Showdown series, where they open a new set or product every week and build decks just from that one set or product. Or you can find every other week on the Junior Journey Challenge on MBT's channel. Or if you want just RJ, you can find him on his Twitch channel, definitely every Saturday morning. And then I think the weekday streams kind of vary sometimes, right?
So I am now regularly streaming Tuesday evenings at 5 p.m. PST.
Tuesday evenings?
Tuesday evenings, yep.
Okay, cool. So after you get done listening to our episode on Tuesday, just go click one over into his stream.
Definitely, exactly. And the most reliable place to find me, of course, is on Twitter.
Yes, absolutely. What is your Twitter handle?
It is at @JamesonBerman.
Okay, and if you go to our Twitter the morning of the airing of this podcast, I'm going to tag RJ in the tweet with this episode, so you should be able to easily find him on Twitter. So, and I will admit, it is a pretty funny Twitter account. I'm not even going to lie to you. I enjoy it, so.
I'll take it. I will take what praise I can get for it. I'm glad you enjoy my nonsense, and I hope other folks do too.
Yep, definitely. I mean, hey, Twitter's where I found you first, so. So thank you everybody for listening to today's episode of the Top Cut Yu-Gi-Oh podcast. The last quick thing before we get out of here is we want to do the podcast question of the day. So the previous question of the day was, what is your favorite summoning mechanic? We have a lot of great answers. I'm a bit biased towards fusion summoning, even though it's a bit much in terms of effort. Synchro, particularly 5D's bias. That's Sophie, actually, RJ. Yeah.
Yep. It's gotta be my synchro team coming through for me here.
That's it. I like all of them except Link and Pendulums. Hey, you must have got out at the same time I did. Xyz. My favorite summoning mechanic is the hardest working plant in the industry, the boy himself, world carrot weight champion. Not a mechanic, but that's fine. Banishing Mist from the graveyard, also not a mechanic, but that's fine. Fusion all day. Normal summons. I think Gemini is sick. They just need to make it good. Listen, all I'm saying is make Alistair a Gemini. That's all I'm saying. It fixes a lot of things. Triff summoning, or pendulum for those that don't know Triff. Link or Xyz. I agree. I like both of those. Normal summon Alistair for the millionth time. Normal summon Alistair is not a mechanic. There's so many normal summon Alistair comments. No,
we'll find
stop.
a new joke someday, I'm sure.
No, stop. Get some help. Oh, pendulums, fusions, banishing monsters from the graveyard to summon a dude. Boy, you should check out Junior Journey 2004 Chaos format.
There's a lot of banishing monsters from the graveyard to summon a dude.
There is. Calling a judge. Well, Trell, that is
summoning a judge.
That is summoning right there. Fusions, synchros and fusions, Xyz, pendulum, synchro, ritual, Xyz, free Denglong. No. Have you read the Sword Soul cards? Fusions, flip summon with Subterror, not a mechanic. Pendulum, dimension summoning, a totally balanced mechanic that lets you pen summon without any pendulums. That sounds terrifying. Pendulum Master Rule 3 also sounds terrifying. Synchros, Xyz, fusions, synchros, normal summon Alistair, still not a mechanic, even if it is your username. Synchros and Xyz. Reasoning summoning. I can get behind that. Reasoning is fine. Not a mechanic, though. Fusion summoning. Do special summons count? Sort of, but not all of them. Pen summonings. Okay. Wow. Lots and lots of answers. Funny that, like, almost nobody said links. Although I know that, like, a lot of people enjoy and regularly perform the summoning of link monsters. So, you know. We got one tribute summon from the Discord server. So
found the Monarch player.
That's it for the podcast question of the day. The new podcast question of the day is courtesy of RJ. He came up with this. What is the funniest Yu-Gi-Oh thing that has happened to you? So go ahead, be sure to go into our Discord server and answer that tomorrow morning or Tuesday morning, whatever day you listen to this. Or you can answer it on Twitter at Top Cut Podcast. There will be a tweet going out at the usual time with the question. So, RJ, thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast, especially with no notice at the last moment. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. You know, if as Winston Churchill said, if you want me to speak for a minute, you'll have to give me a week to prepare. If you want me to speak for 15 minutes, you'll have to give me 3 days. But if you want me to speak for 3 hours, I'm ready to go right now. And that's how I feel. So I appreciate your having me on today.
Of course. It is always wonderful to have funny and interesting guests on the podcast, and you qualify. So
appreciate it, even if I do quote Winston Churchill.
That's fine. That's fine, because Churchill was a person. So
you are not wrong about that fact.
That's right. That's the key to never being wrong. Just make very generalized statements. So, thank you all so much for listening to today's episode of the Top Cut Yu-Gi-Oh podcast. Again, you can find all of our links down below. If the link you're looking for is not there, try the link tree. It's probably in the link tree. There we have like an Amazon wish list. We have our Patreon. We have our Discord, our Twitter, etc. All that. If you want to find RJ's Twitch stream and Twitter, those will be down in the description below. You can check out Team Dark Arm Dealings. They are our sister channel on YouTube from our locals. That is in the description below. And of course, ETB Games, thank you for the sponsorship. Their link is in the description below. And the last one is our TCG Player affiliate link, which is down there as well. So thank you all so much for tuning in, and have a great week.